Maria Santos never wanted to be a hero. She just wanted a steady job with decent pay and maybe some respect from her coworkers. At 28, she had already worked 3 different jobs since finishing her medical assistant training. Each time, she hoped things would be different. Each time, she found herself doing the same thing, being treated like she was invisible. When the military recruiter called her about a position as a medical support technician, Maria almost hung up. She had never thought about joining the army. The recruiter explained that they needed people with her background to help at forward operating bases. The pay was good, much better than what she was making at the clinic in her hometown of Phoenix, Arizona. More importantly, they promised she would be doing meaningful work, helping soldiers who needed medical care. Maria talked to her mother that night over dinner. Her mother, Rosa, had cleaned office buildings for 30 years. She understood what it meant to be overlooked and undervalued. "Mija," her mother said, stirring the rice on the stove, "sometimes you have to take a chance. Maybe this time will be different." 3 months later, Maria found herself at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, going through basic orientation. The other support staff were a mix of people like her, some looking for better opportunities, others wanting to serve their country in some way. They learned about military protocols, basic first aid procedures, and how to work in high-stress environments. During training, Maria met Sergeant First Class Jennifer Walsh, who would be her supervisor. Walsh was a career soldier who had been deployed 4 times. She had short brown hair, always perfectly in place, and a way of looking at people that made them feel like she could see right through them. During their first meeting, Walsh was direct. "Santos, I'm going to be straight with you. Where we're going, there's no room for mistakes. You'll be handling supplies, maintaining equipment, and assisting the medics when needed. Some people think support staff don't matter. Those people are wrong. When someone is bleeding out and we need a specific tool or medication, you better know exactly where it is and get it fast." Maria nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't quite feel. She'd always been good at her job, but this felt different. The weight of responsibility seemed heavier here. The team she was assigned to consisted of 8 people. There were 3 combat medics: Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, Corpsman Lisa Park, and Sergeant David Kim. Rodriguez was the senior medic, a quiet man from Texas who had been doing this job for 6 years. Park was newer, but had already proven herself during her first deployment. Kim was somewhere in between, steady and reliable. The rest of the team included 2 more support technicians like Maria, a communications specialist, and a driver. Everyone had their role, and everyone was expected to perform it perfectly. During the final weeks of training, they worked together constantly, running drills and learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. Maria discovered she had a talent for organization that went beyond what anyone expected. While other support staff focused on their immediate responsibilities, Maria started memorizing the location and purpose of every single piece of equipment they might need. She created her own system for tracking supplies and started anticipating what the medics would need before they asked for it. Rodriguez noticed this first. During a training exercise where they had to treat multiple simulated casualties, Maria had every piece of equipment ready and waiting. She handed him tools before he asked for them. She had IV bags prepared and medication counted out. When the exercise was over, Rodriguez pulled her aside. "Santos, I've worked with a lot of support staff over the years. Most of them do their job and nothing more. You're different. You're thinking ahead, anticipating what we need. That's the kind of thinking that saves lives." Maria felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was the first time in any job that someone had noticed her, going above and beyond. It was the first time someone had suggested that her work actually mattered in a life-or-death way. Walsh was watching all of this too. She started giving Maria additional responsibilities, teaching her things that weren't technically part of her job description. Maria learned how to assist with more complex medical procedures. She learned how to operate the radio equipment in case the communications specialist was unavailable. She even learned basic vehicle maintenance from their driver. The other support staff sometimes grumbled about Maria's eagerness. "You don't have to do all that extra stuff," one of them said during a break. "They're not paying us to be heroes." But Maria wasn't trying to be a hero. She was trying to be useful. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was part of something important. She felt like her skills and her dedication might actually make a difference. As their deployment date approached, the team grew closer. They ate together, trained together, and started to trust each other in ways that only happen when people know they'll have to rely on each other in dangerous situations. Maria found herself feeling protective of her teammates. She wanted to make sure she never let them down. The night before they left for Afghanistan, Maria called her mother. "I'm scared, Mom," she admitted, "but I'm also excited. I think this might be what I was meant to do." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "I'm proud of you, Mija. You've always been strong. Now you get to show the world what I've always known about you." As Maria packed her gear that final night, she looked at herself in the mirror. She still looked like the same person who had been overlooked and underestimated at her previous jobs. But she felt different. She felt ready. She had no idea that in just a few months, she would be the only thing standing between her team and disaster. The forward operating base in Afghanistan was nothing like what Maria had imagined. She had seen war movies, but the reality was both more mundane and more intense than anything Hollywood had shown her. The base was a collection of concrete barriers, prefabricated buildings, and dusty roads surrounded by mountains that looked beautiful and threatening at the same time. Their medical facility was a converted shipping container with additional rooms built around it. It had everything they needed to handle trauma cases, but space was limited and organization was crucial. Maria immediately set to work reorganizing the supplies according to the system she had developed during training. She labeled everything, created detailed inventory lists, and established protocols for restocking. The first few weeks were relatively quiet. Maria's team treated soldiers for minor injuries, illnesses, and the occasional accident. She quickly fell into a routine. Wake up at 0500, check supplies, assist with morning sick call, maintain equipment, help with any procedures during the day, and prepare for the next day before lights out. The other support staff on base noticed Maria's dedication, but didn't always understand it. "She acts like this place is going to be her permanent home," one of them joked to another. But the medical team appreciated having someone who took the work seriously. Rodriguez began relying on Maria for more complex tasks. When they had to perform surgery on a soldier who had been injured in an IED explosion, Maria assisted by anticipating every tool he needed and maintaining sterile conditions. Park started asking Maria to help with patient care, knowing that Maria would monitor vitals carefully and notice any changes. Walsh continued to push Maria to learn new skills. "In a place like this, everyone needs to be able to do everyone else's job," she explained. "You never know when someone might be unavailable." Maria learned how to operate more sophisticated medical equipment, how to communicate with helicopter evacuation teams, and how to coordinate with other medical facilities in the region. About 6 weeks into the deployment, things started to change. Intelligence reports indicated increased enemy activity in their area. Patrols were coming back with more injuries. The atmosphere on the base became more tense, more focused. Everyone could feel that something was building. Maria noticed the change in her teammates' behavior. Rodriguez became more serious, more demanding about equipment readiness. Park started double-checking everything, making sure they had extra supplies of critical medications. Kim began working longer hours, reviewing procedures and practicing difficult scenarios. The communications specialist, Corporal Danny Williams, started monitoring radio traffic more closely. He began teaching Maria how to use the radio equipment just in case. "It's probably nothing," he said, "but it's better to be prepared." Their driver, Specialist Marcus Johnson, started doing more frequent maintenance on their vehicles. He showed Maria how to check fluid levels and identify potential problems. "These trucks are our lifeline," he explained. "If they break down at the wrong time, we're in trouble." Walsh called Maria aside one evening after dinner. They walked to a quiet corner of the base where they could talk privately. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed too beautiful for a place where people were preparing for war. "Santos, I want to talk to you about something," Walsh began. "You've been doing excellent work here, better than I expected, honestly. But I need you to understand that things might get more dangerous soon. The intelligence reports aren't good. We might find ourselves in situations where the normal rules don't apply. Maria felt her stomach tighten. She had known this was a possibility, but hearing it stated so directly made it real. What do you need me to do, Sergeant? I need you to be ready for anything. In a combat situation, people get hurt, equipment breaks, and plans fall apart. When that happens, we need people who can think on their feet and adapt quickly. You've shown me that you can do that. Walsh paused, looking out at the mountains. There's something else. In a serious emergency, you might have to do things that aren't technically part of your job. You might have to make decisions that normally would be made by someone with more rank or more training. Are you prepared for that? Maria thought about her mother, working all those years in jobs where no one noticed her or valued her contribution. She thought about all the times she had been overlooked or dismissed. This was her chance to prove that she could handle responsibility, that she could be trusted when it really mattered. Yes, Sergeant, I'm ready. Walsh smiled slightly. I believe you are. But Santos, being ready and being tested are two different things. When the real thing happens, it's going to be scary and chaotic and nothing like training. People are going to be depending on you in ways you've never experienced before. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She walked around the medical facility, checking supplies and equipment one more time. Everything was perfect, organized exactly the way it should be. But she knew that perfection in a controlled environment was very different from perfection under pressure. She found Rodriguez sitting outside, cleaning his weapon. Can't sleep either? He asked. No. Walsh talked to me tonight about being ready for anything. I keep thinking about what that really means. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, considering his words. Santos, I've been in some bad situations over the years. I've seen people freeze up when things get crazy, and I've seen people rise to the occasion. You can't know which one you'll be until it happens. But I can tell you this, the people who rise to the occasion are usually the ones who cared enough to prepare properly. You've prepared as well as anyone I've ever worked with. 2 days later, the first major incident happened. A patrol hit an IED about 15 miles from the base. Multiple casualties, including serious injuries. Maria's team loaded into their vehicle and raced to the landing zone to meet the incoming helicopter. As they worked to stabilize the injured soldiers and prepare them for evacuation to a larger medical facility, Maria moved with calm efficiency. She had the right equipment ready at the right moment. She anticipated what each medic would need next. She maintained communication with the evacuation helicopter and coordinated with the receiving hospital. When it was over, Walsh found Maria, sitting alone, finally processing what had just happened. How do you feel? Walsh asked. Scared, Maria admitted. But also, useful. Like I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I needed to do. Good. Because this was just the beginning. Things are about to get much more difficult. The attack came at dawn on a Tuesday morning. Maria was in the medical facility checking overnight supplies when the first mortar round hit the base perimeter. The explosion shook the building, knocking several items off shelves. Before she could fully process what was happening, the base alarm started wailing. Incoming! Incoming! All personnel to defensive positions, came the announcement over the loudspeaker. Maria's training kicked in immediately. She began securing loose medical equipment and making sure critical supplies were protected from potential damage. Through the small window, she could see soldiers running to defensive positions along the perimeter walls. Walsh burst through the door, already putting on her body armor. Santos, we're going to have casualties. Get everything ready now, this isn't a drill. The next hour was chaos. Mortar rounds continued to fall sporadically around the base, while enemy small arms fire could be heard in the distance. Maria worked with focused intensity, preparing surgical instruments, organizing blood supplies, and setting up additional treatment areas in case they were overwhelmed with wounded. Rodriguez appeared, breathing heavily after running from his defensive position. They're probing our defenses with small groups while hitting us with indirect fire. Base commander thinks this might be preparation for something bigger. As if summoned by his words, A much larger explosion rocked the base. This one was closer, and the lights flickered off for several seconds before the generator kicked in. When they came back on, Williams stumbled into the medical facility with blood running down his face from a head wound. "Danny." Maria rushed to him with gauze and antiseptic. "What happened?" "Communications building took a direct hit. The whole antenna array is down. I was inside when it happened." He winced as Maria cleaned the wound. "We have no radio contact with headquarters or any outside units." Walsh's face was grim as she processed this information. "How bad is the damage to the communications equipment?" "Bad. The main radio is completely destroyed. I might be able to jury-rig something with spare parts, but it would take hours, and I'd need to be able to work without getting blown up." Before anyone could respond, Johnson came running in carrying Sergeant Kim, who was unconscious and bleeding from multiple wounds. IED went off near the motor pool. Kim was checking the vehicles when it happened. "I think he's got internal bleeding." Maria immediately moved to help Rodriguez assess Kim's condition while Park prepared IV fluids. Kim was pale and his pulse was weak. Rodriguez's examination confirmed their worst fears. Kim needed surgery immediately, and he needed blood. "We need to operate now," Rodriguez said. "But we're going to need everyone. Santos, I need you to assist directly. Forget about the support role today." Maria felt a moment of pure terror. She had assisted with procedures before, but never in a situation like this, and never when someone's life hung in the balance so clearly. But Kim was her teammate, her friend. She couldn't let fear stop her now. "Tell me what you need me to do." 4. The next 2 hours, while the battle continued around them, Maria found herself doing things she had never done before. She helped Rodriguez perform emergency surgery on Kim, while mortar rounds continued to fall outside. She monitored his vital signs, managed his blood transfusion, and assisted with procedures that were far beyond her official training. Meanwhile, Park was treating Williams's head injury and preparing for more casualties that everyone knew were coming. Walsh was coordinating with the base commander, trying to figure out how to get help when their communications were down. The worst moment came when Kim started bleeding internally again during surgery. Rodriguez was working frantically to find the source of the bleeding when Maria noticed Kim's blood pressure dropping rapidly. "Rodriguez, his pressure's dropping fast, 60/40 and falling." "I see it." "Santos, I need you to maintain pressure on this artery while I work. Don't let go no matter what happens." Maria pressed down on the designated spot and held firm even as another explosion nearby shook dust from the ceiling onto their sterile field. She could feel Kim's life literally in her hands. If she let go, if she moved wrong, he would bleed to death. "That's it, Santos. Hold steady. You're doing great." After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Rodriguez managed to repair the damaged blood vessel. Kim's pressure began to stabilize. Maria had never felt relief like that in her entire life. But their relief was short-lived. Johnson burst back into the medical facility with news that changed everything. "The enemy has breached the perimeter. On the south side, they're inside the base. We've got wounded coming in, but some of the guys bringing them are barely able to walk themselves. The base commander is organizing a final defensive line, but he's asking all non-essential personnel to prepare for possible evacuation." Walsh looked around at their team. Kim was stable but critical and couldn't be moved. Williams had a concussion and shouldn't be moved either. They had wounded soldiers being brought to them who needed immediate treatment. "We're not non-essential," Walsh said firmly. "We're staying. These people need us." Over the next several hours, Maria's medical facility became the center of activity for the entire base. Wounded soldiers were brought in constantly. Some had minor injuries that could be treated quickly. Others were critically wounded and needed immediate surgery or stabilization before they could be evacuated. Maria found herself moving between roles constantly. One moment she was assisting Rodriguez with surgery on a soldier who had been shot in the chest. The next moment she was helping Park treat burns on someone who had been caught in an explosion. When Williams was well enough to work, she helped him try to repair their radio equipment using parts salvaged from damaged vehicles. But the enemy was getting closer. They could hear small arms fire getting nearer to their building. Base security was doing their best, but everyone knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. That's when Walsh made a decision that would change everything. Santos, I need you to listen to me carefully. We're in a situation that's not covered by any manual or training program. The base is going to be overrun unless we get help soon. Someone needs to get through to headquarters and coordinate an evacuation for our wounded. Someone needs to take charge of things that normally wouldn't be their responsibility. Maria looked around at her teammates. Rodriguez was exhausted from hours of surgery. Park was treating her fourth critical patient. Williams was barely conscious from his head injury. Johnson was helping defend the perimeter. What do you need me to do, Sergeant? I need you to become something more than support staff, starting right now. Maria looked at Walsh, trying to understand exactly what was being asked of her. Outside, the sound of gunfire was getting closer. Inside, wounded soldiers were depending on her team for their lives. Kim was stable, but still critical. Williams was fighting through a concussion to try to restore communications. Everyone was pushed to their absolute limit. Sergeant, I'm just a medical support technician. I don't have the training or authority to... Santos, forget about your job title. Look around. We have 8 critically wounded soldiers in here who can't be moved. We have enemy forces less than 200 meters away. Our communications are down, and headquarters doesn't even know we're in trouble. Someone needs to figure out how to solve these problems, and everyone else is busy keeping people alive. Walsh grabbed Maria by the shoulders and looked directly into her eyes. I've been watching you for months. You don't just follow orders, you think ahead, you solve problems, and you never give up. Right now, that's exactly what we need. Before Maria could respond, Johnson ran back into the medical facility. His uniform was torn and dirty, and there was blood on his hands that wasn't his own. The perimeter's collapsing on 2 sides. Base commander estimates we have maybe 30 minutes before they reach this building. He's asking if we can move any of the wounded. Rodriguez looked up from the soldier he was treating. Absolutely not. Moving any of these people right now would kill them. We need at least 2 more hours to stabilize everyone. Then we need to hold this position for 2 hours, Maria heard herself saying. Everyone turned to look at her, and she realized she had just made a tactical decision that wasn't hers to make. But once she started talking, she couldn't stop. The ideas were flowing too fast. Johnson, how many vehicles do we still have that run? 3 trucks and 1 armored vehicle. But the armored vehicle has engine problems. Can you fix it? Maybe, but it would take time and I'd need parts. Maria turned to Williams. Danny, how close are you to getting any kind of radio working? Williams held up a partially assembled radio unit. I've got something that might work for short-range communication, but I need about 20 more minutes to finish it, and I need quiet to test it properly. Maria looked at the situation like she was organizing supplies. Everything had a place, everything had a purpose, and there was a logical sequence to getting things done. Okay, here's what we're going to do. She surprised herself with the confidence in her voice. Johnson, forget about the armored vehicle for now. Focus on making sure our 3 trucks are ready to move wounded as soon as Rodriguez and Park can clear them. Danny, you get 10 more minutes on that radio, then we test it whether it's ready or not. Santos, what authority do you have to? Johnson started. Right now I have the authority of someone who's trying to keep everyone alive. Maria interrupted. If you have a better plan, I'm listening. Otherwise, we're doing this. She turned to Walsh. Sergeant, I need you to coordinate with base security. Find out exactly where the enemy is and how much time we really have. And I need to know if there are any other units in the area that might be able to help us. Walsh nodded and headed for the door. As she left, she called back. Santos, you're in charge until I get back. Maria felt a moment of pure panic. She was in charge of a combat medical facility under enemy attack. 6 months ago, she had been a medical assistant in Phoenix, Arizona, dealing with routine clinic visits and insurance paperwork. Now she was making life and death decisions for her entire team. But she didn't have time for panic. Rodriguez needed help with a soldier who was going into shock. Park was trying to treat 2 wounded soldiers simultaneously. Williams was working frantically on the radio while dealing with a concussion. Everyone was depending on her to coordinate everything. For the next 10 minutes, Maria found herself doing things she had never imagined. She triaged incoming wounded, deciding who needed immediate treatment and who could wait. She coordinated with Johnson to prepare vehicles for evacuation. She helped Williams test radio equipment while simultaneously assisting Rodriguez with a complex procedure. When Williams finally got a weak signal on the improvised radio, Maria was the one who made contact with a unit 15 miles away. "This is Forward Operating Base Cherokee. We are under heavy attack with multiple casualties and need immediate assistance." The voice that came back was scratched with static but clear enough to understand. "Cherokee, this is Thunder 6. We've been trying to reach you for 3 hours. Headquarters lost all contact. What's your situation?" Maria found herself giving a detailed tactical report to a unit commander she had never met. She described the enemy positions, the number of wounded, their defensive capabilities, and their immediate needs. As she talked, she realized she knew more about what was happening at their base than anyone else because she had been coordinating everything. "Thunder 6, we have 8 critical wounded who cannot be moved for at least 90 minutes. We need immediate air support and ground reinforcement to hold our position. Cherokee, be advised we have helicopters and ground units moving to your location. Estimated arrival time 45 minutes. Can you hold that long?" Maria looked around the medical facility. Rodriguez and Park were working on their most critical patients. Johnson was organizing defensive positions with the remaining base security. Williams was maintaining radio contact despite his head injury. Everyone was doing more than their job required. "Thunder 6, we'll hold as long as we need to." As soon as she ended the radio transmission, Walsh returned with an update from base security. "Santos, the situation is worse than we thought. Enemy forces are closing in from 3 directions. Base commander estimates 20 minutes before they reach us." "Help is coming," Maria told her, "but they need 45 minutes to get here." Walsh looked at her steadily. "Then we need to buy them 25 more minutes than we have." Maria felt something change inside her. She wasn't scared anymore. She wasn't worried about her authority or her job title or whether she was qualified to be making decisions. She was angry. These people were her team, her friends, her responsibility. She wasn't going to let them down. "Then that's what we'll do. Johnson, I need you to set up a defensive position that protects this building and the wounded. Use whatever you can find. Vehicles, equipment, anything that stops bullets. Danny, maintain contact with Thunder 6 and guide them to our exact position. Rodriguez, Park, you keep working on the wounded. Don't worry about anything else." "What about you?" "Santos," Walsh asked. Maria picked up a rifle that had been left by one of the wounded soldiers. She had fired weapons during basic training, but she had never expected to use one in combat. "I'm going to help Johnson hold the line. These people aren't taking our wounded." As she headed toward the door, Rodriguez called out to her. "Santos, 6 months ago you were worried about organizing supplies. Look at you now." Maria paused at the doorway. 6 months ago, I didn't know what I was capable of. Turns out neither did anyone else. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Maria's life. She found herself crouched behind an overturned supply truck with Johnson and 2 base security soldiers, watching enemy fighters move between buildings less than 100 meters away. The rifle felt heavy and unfamiliar in her hands, but she held it steady. "There, by the generator building," whispered Private Martinez, one of the security soldiers. 3 of them moving toward our position. Maria could see them now. Figures, in combat gear, moving carefully from cover to cover, getting closer to the medical facility with each advance. Behind her, she could hear Rodriguez and Park still working on the wounded, their voices calm and professional despite the chaos outside. Johnson had done an impressive job setting up their defensive position in just a few minutes. He had positioned 2 trucks to create a barrier that protected the medical facility, while giving them good fields of fire. He had also rigged up early warning positions using tripwires and empty cans that would alert them if anyone tried to approach from behind. "Santos," Johnson whispered, "you don't have to be out here. Your job is inside with the wounded." "My job is wherever it needs to be," Maria replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Besides, if they get past us, there won't be any wounded left to treat." William's voice crackled over the radio from inside the building. "Thunder 6, this is Cherokee. Enemy forces are approximately 75 meters from our position and closing. Where are you? Cherokee, Thunder 6. We are 8 minutes out. Air support is 3 minutes ahead of us. Hold your position. 3 minutes. Maria tried to calculate how close the enemy fighters would be in 3 minutes. Too close. They were going to have to fight. The first shot came from Martinez's position. One of the enemy fighters had gotten careless, exposing himself as he tried to move to a better position. Martinez's shot dropped him immediately, but it also announced their location to everyone else in the area. What followed was the most intense firefight Maria had ever imagined. Enemy bullets cracked overhead and slammed into their improvised barriers. The sound was deafening, and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. Maria found herself firing back, not really aiming at specific targets but trying to keep the enemy fighters from advancing. Reloading, Johnson called out, ducking behind cover to change magazines. Maria shifted position to cover his section while he reloaded, and suddenly found herself face to face with an enemy fighter who had managed to get much closer than anyone had realized. For a split second, they stared at each other across 20 meters of open ground. Then both raised their weapons simultaneously. Maria fired first. She didn't think about it, didn't hesitate, didn't consider the implications. Her training took over, and she squeezed the trigger 3 times in rapid succession. The fighter dropped, and Maria immediately shifted her attention to the next threat. "Santos, behind you!" Martinez shouted. Maria spun around to see another fighter approaching, from a direction they hadn't expected. This one was heading directly for the medical facility, apparently trying to bypass their defensive position entirely. If he reached the building, he would have a clear shot at everyone inside. The wounded soldiers, Rodriguez, Park, everyone who was depending on them. Maria didn't think, she just moved. She left her defensive position and ran at an angle to intercept the fighter before he could reach the building. It was tactically stupid. She was exposing herself to fire from multiple directions, but it was the only way to protect the people inside. The fighter saw her coming and turned his weapon toward her. Maria dove behind a pile of sandbags just as bullets chewed up the ground where she had been running. She was now cut off from Johnson and Martinez, alone and pinned down, with an enemy fighter between her and the medical facility. This was exactly the kind of situation they had warned her about in training, the kind where people get killed doing heroic but foolish things. But as she lay behind the sandbags, she could hear Rodriguez's voice through the thin walls of the medical facility, calmly giving instructions to Park as they worked to save someone's life. She could hear the wounded soldiers inside, some of them conscious and probably terrified by the gunfire outside. These people had become her family over the past few months. She wasn't going to let them down now. Maria took a deep breath, checked her ammunition, and prepared to move again. But before she could act, the most beautiful sound she had ever heard filled the air, the distinctive whop, whop, whop of approaching helicopters. The first helicopter appeared over the ridgeline like an avenging angel. It was an Apache gunship, and it immediately began engaging enemy positions around the base. The sound of its 30mm cannon was like thunder, and Maria could see enemy fighters breaking contact and running for cover. The second helicopter was a Blackhawk loaded with reinforcements. It landed in a cloud of dust just outside the base perimeter, and soldiers began jumping out before it had fully touched down. "Cherokee, this is Thunder 6 actual. We are on the ground and moving to your position. Mark your location with smoke if you have it." William's voice came over the radio, excited but professional. "Thunder 6 Cherokee Medical Facility is the building with the Red Cross painted on the roof. Friendly forces are in defensive positions on the south and east sides of that building." Maria heard all of this through her radio earpiece, but her immediate problem hadn't changed. She was still pinned down, and the enemy fighter was still between her and the medical facility. The arrival of air support had disrupted the overall attack, but this particular fighter seemed determined to complete his mission. She could hear him moving, trying to get a better angle on her position. In a few seconds, he would have a clear shot. Maria had to move now, or she was going to die behind these sandbags. She came up firing not at where the fighter was, but at where she thought he was going to be. It was pure instinct, the kind of split-second decision that can't be taught or planned. Her burst of gunfire caught him as he was moving between positions, and he went down hard. Maria waited, weapon trained on his position, making sure he wasn't going to get up again. When she was certain the threat was eliminated, she ran the final 20 meters to the medical facility and burst through the door. Rodriguez looked up from the patient he was treating. "Santos, are you hurt?" Maria looked down at herself, surprised to discover that she wasn't wounded despite everything that had just happened. "I'm fine. How are our people?" "Everyone's stable. We're ready to start moving them as soon as the evacuation. Helicopters get here." Park appeared from behind a medical screen where she had been treating another patient. "Maria, what happened out there? We heard a lot of shooting." Before Maria could answer, Walsh entered the building, followed by several soldiers in different uniforms, the reinforcements from Thunder 6. Their commander, a major, was looking around the medical facility with obvious amazement. "This is incredible," the major said to Walsh. "Your people held off a company-sized attack with minimal casualties and saved all of your wounded. How did you manage it?" Walsh looked at Maria, who was still holding her rifle and trying to process everything that had just happened. "Major, I'd like you to meet the person who coordinated our defense. This is Medical Support Technician Maria Santos." The major stared at Maria. "Your support staff?" "Yes, sir," Maria replied. "I mean, I was. I'm not sure what I am anymore." 3 weeks later, Maria found herself standing in a conference room at Bagram Airfield, wearing a clean uniform and feeling completely out of place. The room was filled with officers of various ranks, all discussing her actions during the attack on Forward Operating Base Cherokee. She had been called here to give a formal debrief, but it felt more like being examined under a microscope. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the Regional Medical Command Officer, was leading the meeting. She was a tall woman with gray hair and intense eyes who had spent 25 years in military medicine. She had been asking Maria detailed questions about the attack for over an hour. "Technician Santos, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. When your communications went down, you took initiative to jury-rig a radio system with Corporal Williams?" "Yes, ma'am. But Williams did most of the technical work. I just helped coordinate the effort and prioritized what we needed to accomplish first. And when your base was under attack, you organized the defensive positions and coordinated with incoming reinforcements?" "Ma'am, everyone was busy with their critical tasks. Someone needed to handle coordination, and I was available to do it." "Colonel." Hayes looked at the other officers in the room, then back at Maria. "Technician Santos, do you understand that what you did during that attack went far beyond your job description or your rank?" Maria felt her stomach tighten. She had been wondering if she was in trouble for overstepping her authority. "Yes, ma'am. If I acted inappropriately, I apologize. I was just trying to help save lives." "Inappropriately?" Colonel Hayes laughed, surprising everyone in the room. "Santos, you saved 8 critically wounded soldiers, coordinated a successful defense against overwhelming odds, and kept your entire medical team functioning under extreme pressure. The only thing inappropriate here would be not recognizing exceptional performance when we see it." Maria blinked, not sure she had heard correctly. "Ma'am." "Santos, we've been reviewing your actions and interviewing everyone who was there. Rodriguez says you assisted with emergency surgery that was beyond your training level and performed flawlessly. Park says you coordinated patient care better than some senior medics she's worked with. Williams says you helped him focus on technical tasks by handling all the communication and coordination challenges. Johnson says you organized a defensive strategy that bought them exactly the time they needed." Colonel Hayes stood up and walked around the table to face Maria directly. "Most importantly, Major Thompson from Thunder 6 says that when his unit arrived, they found a medical facility that was perfectly organized, fully functional, and had successfully protected every single wounded soldier under the most difficult circumstances possible." She paused, studying Maria's face. "Santos, in 25 years of military medicine, I have never seen a support technician rise to the occasion the way you did. Never." Maria felt overwhelmed. She had been expecting criticism or questions about whether she had followed proper procedures. She hadn't expected praise. "Ma'am, I just did what needed to be done. Anyone in my position would have done the same thing." "No, Santos. They wouldn't have. Most people would have followed their job description and waited for someone else to make the hard decisions. You saw what needed to happen and made it happen. Another officer spoke up, a major that Maria didn't recognize. Santos, we're recommending you for several commendations, including the Bronze Star with Valor. But more importantly, we want to offer you some opportunities. He opened a folder and pulled out several documents. First, we'd like to offer you the chance to attend advanced medical training. You've proven you can handle responsibilities beyond your current level, and we think you'd excel at more sophisticated medical procedures. Maria looked at the papers, trying to process what was being offered. Advanced medical training would mean becoming a fully qualified medic, maybe even a nurse. It was an opportunity she had never imagined. Second, the major continued, we're developing a new program for non-commissioned officers who show exceptional leadership potential. It's designed for people who might not have traditional backgrounds, but who demonstrate the ability to handle responsibility and make good decisions under pressure. What kind of program? Maria asked. Leadership development, advanced tactical training, and preparation for positions of greater responsibility. Essentially, we want to fast-track you for promotion and leadership roles. Maria looked around the room at all the officers watching her. A few months ago, she had been a support technician whose main concern was organizing supplies efficiently. Now they were offering her a completely different career path. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course. Why me? There are lots of people with more experience, more education, better qualifications. Colonel Hayes smiled. Santos, let me tell you something about leadership. It's not about having the best credentials or the most experience. It's about seeing what needs to be done and having the courage to do it, even when it's scary or difficult. It's about caring enough about other people that you'll take risks to help them. She gestured toward the other officers in the room. Every person in this room has advanced degrees, years of training, and extensive experience. But when your base was under attack, none of us were there. You were, and you didn't wait for someone else to solve the problems. You solved them yourself. Maria thought about her mother, who had spent 30 years being overlooked and undervalued. She thought about all the jobs where she had felt invisible, where her contributions hadn't mattered. She thought about Rodriguez and Park and Williams and Johnson and all the wounded soldiers who had depended on her during the attack. Ma'am, if I accept these opportunities, what happens to my team? Your team will continue their deployment with replacements as needed. But Santos, they don't need you to take care of them anymore. You've trained them to function without you. Now it's time to think about what you can accomplish next. Maria looked at the documents again. The advanced medical training would take 18 months. The leadership program would take another year after that. It was a completely different future than anything she had planned. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course, but Santos, while you're thinking, remember something. During that attack, you proved that you're not support staff. You're a leader. The question now is whether you're ready to accept that and build on it. 2 days later, Maria called her mother from a quiet spot on the base. She told her about the attack, about the decisions she had made, and about the opportunities she was being offered. Her mother was quiet for a long time after Maria finished talking. Finally, she spoke. Mija, do you remember what I told you when you were thinking about joining the army? You said sometimes you have to take a chance. That's right. And you took that chance, and look what happened. You found out what you're really capable of. Now they're offering you another chance. But Mom, what if I can't handle it? What if I was just lucky during the attack? Maria, luck doesn't perform emergency surgery. Luck doesn't coordinate defensive positions. Luck doesn't keep 8 people alive when everything is falling apart. That was you, Mija. That was your skill and your courage and your heart. Her mother paused, and Maria could hear her crying softly. I'm so proud of you. You've become everything I always knew you could be. That evening, Maria found Walsh in the dining facility. Walsh was due to rotate back to the States in a few weeks, and Maria wanted to talk to her before she made her decision. Sergeant, can I ask you something? During the attack, when you put me in charge, were you sure I could handle it? Walsh looked at her thoughtfully. Santos, nobody is ever sure about anything in a situation like that, but I had been watching you for months. I saw how you approached problems, how you cared about the team, how you never gave up when things got difficult. I didn't know if you could handle being in command during a firefight, but I knew you were the kind of person who would give everything to try. And that was enough? It was enough because you made it enough. Santos, the thing about leadership is that it's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about being willing to take responsibility when no one else can or will. Walsh smiled. Besides, you did handle it. You didn't just handle it, you excelled at it. So the question isn't whether you can do it. The question is whether you're going to let fear stop you from doing more of it. Maria made her decision that night. She accepted both programs, the advanced medical training and the leadership development program. It meant committing to several more years in the military, and it meant accepting responsibilities she had never imagined for herself. But she had learned something important during that attack. She had learned that she was capable of much more than she had ever believed. She had learned that when people needed her, she could rise to the occasion. She had learned that being underestimated could be an advantage, because it meant people were surprised when you exceeded their expectations. Most importantly, she had learned that the label support staff had never defined what she could do. It had only defined what other people expected her to do. 6 months later, Sergeant Maria Santos graduated at the top of her advanced medical training class. A year after that, she completed the leadership program and was promoted to staff sergeant. 3 years after,